Last show of the year. Happy New Year, everyone. And I've got a great show lined up tonight with Dr. Bill Warner, and we're going to be discussing political Islam. And Bill Warner is the founder of the Center for the Study of Political Islam, and Bill has had a long battle in fighting and exposing Islam, and this is about my 22nd show for this year, 2019, discussing Islam shows with Lloyd DeYoung, with Todd, as well as with Sonia Azam and others, Pastor Christopher Manti, etc. But we wanted to continue this line of research into Islam and help people further understand the agenda on what it is. And Bill, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. We're going to discuss my favorite topic.
Good to hear. And you know what? I just realized I forgot to put on my headphones, so people may not be able to hear you properly. Hold on just a second. Get that fixed real fast so that we make sure that everybody can hear you as they're supposed to. Goodness, so much to think about and do, and then you forget your headphones. So let's see here. That should make things better. Hopefully everybody can hear you now. Can you anyway, sorry, go ahead. Everybody should be able to hear you now. Anyway, welcome to the show, Bill.
I'm happy to be here.
So let's see. We've got a lot to cover, but first off, you want to talk about the organization that you founded and who's involved in that?
Yes, it's the Center for the Study of Political Islam. I coined the word political Islam right after 9/11 because I realized I'd studied Islam before 9/11, and I realized that the battle was on, but that we needed something that we could discuss in America. And with the First Amendment, I wasn't about to try to take on any religion. All right. But I am interested in taking on a political system. And so I define the word political Islam to refer to the part of Islam that deals with the non-believer, people like you and me. So this is the study of political Islam. Oddly enough, I have an organization in Europe, which is the Center for the Study of Political Islam, and I have 200 men there and women. So I have a large organization that's functioning in Europe, and we're going to bring it this year to America. I've been over there. I've been having a working organization for 6 years over there. So we developed manuals, procedures, and now we're going to bring it to America.
Great to hear. And so you've been, for those who don't know, Dr. Bill Warner, he's considered a raving bigot and Islamophobe, and what other names do they call you?
It's just one long hyphenated word: racist, hater, bigot, Islamophobe.
Oh, that's okay. Well, yeah.
He's the one white nationalist, if you want to.
Oh, really? Racist. Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing is that the Nazis and the Islamists worked together in World War II, and they still do today. We've exposed that extensively on this show, but that's something that they don't want people to understand. And it's like if you are exposing this and using primary citations and documentable facts,
that's all I do.
That's what makes you the racist, and as long as you tote the official line and don't cite their own documents and books and whatnot, you're fine. But as soon as you actually crack the Quran or the Hadith or the Tasfir, etc., that makes you an Islamophobe if you actually provide their own citations to show what it's about. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. And people like myself, David Wood, Robert Spencer, Emil Amani, all of us do the same thing. We quote the primary sources. I like to tell people my two teachers are Dr. Allah and Professor Muhammad. But it's true.
Yeah.
I quote Muhammad more than anybody except the local imam.
Wow. Well, and probably more than him, too, because, in my opinion, if most Islamists knew what the Quran actually teaches, they probably wouldn't be Islamist. Would you agree with that?
Well, once you actually understand the doctrine and you really understand it, it takes a peculiar kind of person to stay with it. I can give you an example here. Christians for 1400 years have not been very successful in converting Muslims to Christianity. There are two reasons for this, but there are people now who've shown us how to do this successfully. And the way you successfully convert a Muslim to Christianity is, first of all, you explain to him what Islam is, who Muhammad is, who Allah is. And once you understand who they are through the primary sources, then you create doubt within the minds of the Muslim, because it's like, he doesn't like that. He doesn't like what he reads and hears that come from Muhammad and Allah. Then you teach Jesus. Then you have a chance of converting. I spoke with a man in my house about 3 or 4 months ago, a Christian from Australia who has converted 2,600 Muslims to Christianity by himself.
Wow.
So it is a system that works. That is, so everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim, needs to understand Islam. That's all I'm about. That's my marketing plan. I want to explain to you what Islam really is through the Quran, the Sirah, and the Hadith. The Sirah is the biography, the Hadith are his traditions, and of course the Quran everybody's heard of, even if they've never read it.
Right. Well,
That's
you
what I
know,
do.
and we get some idiots out there who think that Islam and Judaism are the same thing, and that Islam came out of Judaism, even though Islam specifically says that they must kill all Jews. And most of the anti-Semitic attacks out there were started through Islam. You know,
This is a largely unrecognized situation, and may I add, even amongst Jews. I know many Jews, and they want to. Everyone has met this nice person who is a Muslim, so they met. Well, if he's a nice guy and he's a Muslim, then Islam must be good. Well, Islam and Muslims are two different things, as you may well know.
yeah. Well, and we've exposed the differences of such nonsense claims, and there's always someone out there with a less than 95 IQ who regurgitates such dumb claims without reading or understanding anything. And then you have other people that claim that, oh well, the Vatican founded Islam, and never mind that the Muslims attacked the Vatican and tried to get over the wall. In fact, that's why the Vatican has the wall now. But
exactly,
and so you get some really low IQ people who make such claims. But so let's segue from there for a minute. You've been under severe attack through Google, PayPal, YouTube, Amazon, etc. Would you talk about that?
Well, it's a coordinated story. We need to start with the fact that there's a man called George Soros. You've heard of him, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Nazi, right.
So anyway, he has an organization called Media Matters. And some years ago, I can't remember the exact time, Media Matters had a conference in Florida. And the featured people were the Southern Poverty Law Center. Have you explained to your audience who the Southern Poverty Law Center is?
No, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Well, it is a civil rights organization that deals with bigotry and hatred. And they've turned hatred into a major business. They're worth over $333 billion, which is a lot of money for a civil rights organization. And a lot of their money is overseas. But that has nothing to do with the fact that they make unsubstantiated charges. At one time, they said that I was one of America's top 10 bigots, which for a man now 79 years old, a father, a grandfather, was sort of odd that I was one of the worst people in America. Anyway, after this conference, things already started to happening. Let me give you an example. My book on Sharia law was #1 bestseller on Islamic law on Amazon. Not bad, eh?
Right.
That disappeared. You could still see my book on Amazon, but you didn't get the viral connections to lead you to it. You had to look it up specifically. So that's what happened with Amazon. Before this, YouTube had contacted me and told me, you're doing extraordinarily well with your videos, but you don't know what you're doing. We were going to assign you a person from YouTube to teach you how to make good videos. So I did what they said. My viewership went up. Then after the Media Matters meeting, all of a sudden I was demonetized. They wanted me to bring in the most money. They went from telling me we want you to bring in the most to we don't want your money at all. Then shadow banning, Twitter, of course, is standard.
Oh yeah, I've been shadow banned on Twitter for years. I think ever since I opened my account, in fact.
It could be. So anyway, let's see. And then,
I've got like 3,000 people on my Twitter account. This is simulcasting over there right now, and and it'll have like, a handful of views with thousands of people subscribed to my Twitter account.
okay, so you've experienced the same thing I have.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And let's see. Then about 3 or 4 weeks ago, PayPal contacted me and told me that they were taking me off their pay. We use them for donations. They said, we're shutting you down because you have violated our terms and conditions. That box you check.
Right.
Then I got one from my personal account, which said that I was a safety risk, which was the oddest thing. I've already told you I'm 79 years old, and to be a safety risk at age 79 is like really sort of odd, isn't it?
Right. Well, when you present primary citations, that is a safety risk for those who are spreading lies and bullshit.
And the
And see
reason they
that the
shut us
trolls
down
are
is
the trolls are going ape shit in the chat tonight. They just can't handle that you and I are on discussing all of this stuff. So they're trying to attack me. They're trying to attack you, calling me a sellout, this and that. And they're very frightened when anybody puts out this information. So you get these, weak-minded morons who, for money, they go out and troll and harass people, and they spread, hate speech. And, so anybody who doesn't tote the line, they have to attack or bring up irrelevant nonsense because they can't deal with the discussion at hand.
this is the nub of the problem. That is, people, when they debate with me, they don't use Islam to debate with me. They basically accuse me of being a racist, hater, bigot, Islamophobe.
Right.
And by the way, you've mentioned some of these people as being low IQ. I've had this done to me by department heads at universities. These are people with plenty of IQ points.
Well, most university professors only hit about 130, 135, so I still consider them pretty down there. But that's a whole other.
I'm just telling you, there are some very intelligent people who have been told that people such as myself are evil, and so they just believe that because they don't want to probe into the subject of Islam itself. Most people are very happy not knowing anything about it. They don't want to hear about it, talk about it, think about it. And so the reason people like myself are scary is we want to talk about it and think about it. That's what's scary.
Right. Well, and I wanted to say very quickly hello to Sonia Azam in the chat there. She was on the show a few weeks ago. She was an Islamic apostate turned Christian. And so welcome to, I'm glad you're watching the show, Sonia. And,
let me say to Sonia, whom I've never met, you're one of the most courageous people in the world. Anybody who leaves Islam is a person of intelligence and courage.
Yep. And, she basically went into hiding for a while, but I had her on the show a few weeks ago. Maybe you want to check that out. Maybe she should contact you and have you on her show as well. But she has a YouTube channel trying to convert Muslims to Christianity now. So even braver, right?
Yes.
So Islam and their wars, are they all defensive wars?
Well, part of them are, part of them were, but now they're no longer. Here's the thing about Islam. It is a dualistic system. Yes, there were peaceful wars, the defensive wars, and then there were offensive wars. Just about everything you can say about Islam, you can say two things about it. Muhammad's life can be summarized like this. He preached the religion of Islam for 13 years in Mecca and converted about 150 people. That's about 10 a year. The peaceful religion was a failure. He was driven out of Mecca because he created dissension within the town. And so then he went to Medina, where he became a politician and a jihadist. And this comes directly from the official biography. When he died, every Arab on the peninsula was a Muslim. So jihad and politics made him overwhelmingly successful. So we have here two Muhammads, a politician and a religious leader. So Islam is a religion, but the bulk of its doctrine is about the non-Muslim, the kafir.
Right. 51% of the Quran being about killing and subjugating the non-believers.
Yes.
The kafir, right.
So, but part of the Quran, by the way, is quite beautiful. So what I'm saying is that the heart of the problem in understanding Islam is its dualistic nature. It's like it's got good stuff and bad stuff. And because what we want to say is this, well, I met this Muslim, he's a nice guy, so therefore Islam is nice. Doesn't work that way. Let's talk about Islam rather than Muslim. I never discuss Muslims, by the way. But a Muslim must follow the Quran, the Sirah, and the Hadith if he's to be a real Muslim. So the question is, which is the real Islam? Well, they're both real. It is a religion of peace, and it's also the jihad of it's the politics of jihad and death. And you want to say, well, wait a minute, those contradict each other. So one of them has to be wrong. You're thinking like a Westerner when you think like that. You follow me? That's Aristotelian logic.
Right.
Islam is based on dualistic logic. Instead of eliminating contradictions, it embraces contradictions. And so therefore, anything, what it boils down to is just about anything you want to say is true.
Right. Well, and so to your point there, a contradiction is always a lie or an error under Aristotelian logic, whereas,
Yes.
and there are no contradictions in nature. So Islam hides behind that using taqiyya, etc., to spread their doctrine. And so that's the foundation of Islam, is spreading lies, whereas the foundation of Christianity, God cannot lie, Jesus is the way, the truth, the life, Satan is the father of all lies. So that going back to, I sent you that citation from the OED earlier about Baphomet being another name for Muhammad, but most people don't realize that that is at the core. It's a religion of lying and deception and death.
It is all those things. Muhammad was involved in 95 acts of jihad in 9 years of his life. Think about that. 95 acts of jihad in 9 years. That's a lot of jihad. But the reason he did it was it made him successful. He won at that game. So we're talking about the dualism of Islam, because it's so many people fall prey to this. They meet a nice person, or they hear something, or they read a nice verse out of the Quran, and they want to say, well, see, that's nice, therefore Islam is nice.
Forgetting abrogation.
Well, even the Quran, look, the Muslims, the Arabs of Muhammad's day were not dummies. They said to him, whoa, wait a minute, Muhammad. Last year you told us this, now you're telling us that. Those two things contradict each other. Which one is it? So the Quran advances what's called abrogation, which is the latter verse is stronger and better than the earlier verse. Listen carefully to what I said. The earlier verse is still true, it's just weaker. So that's the way they handle, that's the reason I say it's actually dualistic, because both things are true at the same time. I'd call it abrogation, but the dualism thing also covers the hadith. For instance, there are hadith about beating your wife, there are hadith about not beating your wife. So which is it? Do you beat her or not? Well, you can have whichever thing you want. So Islam is like having a sink with hot water and cold water. You want hot water, you got it. You want cold water, you got it. Anything, you want war, you want peace, it's there.
Anything that Muhammad said is halal and therefore good.
It's all good.
Right. Do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, as the Satanists say, right?
Right.
So let's see here. Moving on. Most people don't realize that there were 500 wars into Europe by the Islamists before the Crusades pushed the Muslims back into the Middle East to stop the invasion and the enslavement of Europe and the subjugation of Europe by King Jan of Poland, who led that.
Yes. We've done some good things in dealing with Islam. However, I maintain this, that we can defeat Islam now without use of sword, war, and whatnot. This is an ideological war, and we need to enter into it. What this means is that every Christian needs to understand Islam. Now, let me give you a little story here about the sadness of this. 20 years ago, right after 9/11, there was the first of the bridge building exercises here in Nashville. A rabbi came, a Methodist minister came, and a Muslim imam came. So my wife asked them this question. She said to the Christian and the Jew, have you read the Quran? No. She said to the imam, have you read the Old Testament? Yes, I have. I've had courses in it. She said, have you read the New Testament? Yes, I have. I've had courses in that as well. So how is this going to work? I tell you how it's going to work. 20 years later, the Christians in the town of Nashville know less about Islam than they did 20 years ago, because 20 years ago they knew nothing, and now then they think they know something, and the something is good. So we have here actually negative knowledge. So therefore, I maintain that
Well
Christians
said.
need to know what?
Well said. Negative knowledge. That's exactly correct.
Yes. So therefore, I maintain that what we have to do is we have to start educating not only the Muslims about Islam, but we need to understand in particular Christians, and in particular those who want to proselytize. A Christian now, instead of buying an airplane ticket to Africa, needs to just drive to the next zip code. There's no need to get on the plane anymore to convert Muslims.
Right. Well, and here's the biggest thing that I come across is that the people who are the most ignorant about a subject think that they're the most educated. It doesn't matter, those who hate on Christianity, they've never read the Bible, much less the New Testament, and they think they're the most educated on Christianity. They've never read the Quran, the Hadith, the Tasvir, etc., and they think they're the most educated on Islam. And, it's like these are the same type of people who put these cliche, idiotic bumper stickers on the back of their car that say coexist, and, and they don't even get that, if they had the wherewithal, the IQ level to say, maybe I should read the beliefs of each of these religions in this bumper sticker so that I know what they teach to see if they can coexist. They don't start with that premise. They just, hey, Christianity and Islam and Judaism, they're all Abrahamic religions, and therefore can't we all just get along? And once you actually open up the Quran and the Islamic text and you realize what it is, you quickly realize that there is no way possible that we can coexist, because the tenets of Islam are juxtaposed to the entire foundation of Western civilization.
I agree. This battle has been going on a long time, but we now have the tools to end it today because, like I say, this is an ideological struggle. If we would, let me make a summary statement here. 20 years after 9/11, we're losing, and we're getting weaker and weaker. The Muslims are getting stronger and stronger. We're being neurotic and don't want to look at the fact we're losing because we don't want to ask the question, what should we do to win? But we need to ask these questions. The trouble with it is, and what's so painful to me is that we can win, and yet we decide not to win because we want to be nice. Here's the deal.
Well, nice, by definition, nice actually means foolish or stupid. So,
well, I'm just telling you that here in the town of Nashville, Tennessee, your Islam is safe from the Christians because they're not going to try to convert you. I mean, of all things, the Pope even recently said that you shouldn't try to convert Muslims. Where does this man live?
Right.
And has he ever opened up the book, the Bible? I wonder.
Well,
I'm being ironic.
Horatio in the chat says, Happy New Year. Why is the Nation of Islam defended more, but Christianity is more demonized? And, they're juxtaposed. Christianity believes that truth is God. Islam, it's okay to beat your wife. It's okay to murder non-believers. It's okay to murder Tasfir. It's okay to, pedophilia is okay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why is one defended and the other one attacked? Christians are the most attacked people on the planet right now.
They're also the most persecuted group.
Right.
And this irritates me because if we're bringing refugees into America, why are we bringing Christians? I just ask you that question.
Right. Good question.
Why are most of them Muslims? And I'll tell you why. In the town of Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm just talking about what I see and know here, the biggest supporter of Islam are the pulpits of the churches. They're the ones who say, oh, yes, we have a Christian governor who is a very pious man, and he wants to bring in all the Muslims he can because therefore they'll be safe in America and he thinks they'll be converted. This is not happening. These are actions made by people who are pious and well-meaning, but what they want to do is they want to tie, and the Muslims want to win. Now, if you have two teams and one is playing to tie and the other is playing to win, which one's going to win? I ask you.
Well, the ones who wants to win, and
Exactly.
And one is going to use lying and murder and subjugation, and we got to tax the dhimmi, etc. And the other one is going to say, "Oh, can't we all just get along? See, I have my coexist bumper sticker on the back of my car." And by the way, let's give up our Second Amendment rights and our First Amendment rights so we can't even defend ourselves. And meanwhile, and let's have abortions. Meanwhile, are Islamists getting rid of their guns? Are they murdering their own babies, etc.? Of course they're not, And so this all of this plays into that ultimate agenda of subjugating Western culture.
What irritates me is we seem to be willing to subjugate ourselves.
Right. Well said.
We seem to be willing to subjugate ourselves. This does not go well. Look, don't believe anything I've told you. Instead, say, well, I'm not going to believe anything Warner says. I just want to look at history. What happens over 1,400 years of history? I've talked to Christians who did not know that Syria used to be Christian, Turkey used to be Christian, Iraq used to be Christian, Iran was half Christian. Egypt was Christian. Christians don't even realize that almost everywhere they look to see Islam used to be Christian.
All of those cities written to by Paul in the Bible that used to be Christian that are gone now, or they were all subjugated by Islam.
And don't forget the 7 churches of Asia. So all of these are gone. Saul was from Tarsus. Do you know how many Muslims? Do you know how many Christians are left in Tarsus? It has a different name today. Zip, 0 and none. So this is what's happened in history. Why do we think it will happen differently today? It's the same Islam, and Islam does not change. That's another one we can talk about later. Anyone who says that Islam can be reformed just told me, he says, I don't know anything about the topic. So all of these things are happening, and they're happening because we're not playing heads up ball.
Right. Well, and how much is Islam or how much are Islam and Muhammad about peace?
A small amount.
Like 2% or something like that?
I'm going to give you an example.
All right.
I took the Hadith by Bukhari. They're on my hard drive, and I searched for every Hadith tradition about jihad. 21% of the Hadith by Bukhari are about jihad. So that's about 1,400 Hadith. That's a lot of killing. So you then take those and you sort them in as 2 piles now, the jihad about the inner struggle and the jihad of killing kafirs. 1.6% of them are about jihad, the inner struggle. The other, basically 98% about killing kafirs. So can we say that Islam is a religion of peace? Yes, we can. 2%.
1.6, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to give you every edge I can here, okay?
Right. Well, and, of course, we're always told that jihad means the inner peace or the inner struggle and not the other.
Well, that is one of the meanings.
The other 98%. Well, yeah, but they're going to play the 2% up or the 1.6% up. They're going to blow that up really big and then make the other 98.4% super, super, super tiny.
That's the way it works. But that's all they want to talk about. They want to talk about the good. Talking about the good, I just want to talk about the whole thing. I've been an expert witness in a court of law, and I had to swear that I would tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. That is, I was not only I was supposed to not lie, but I was also supposed to tell him the whole truth. Right. Why did I take an oath to tell the whole truth? Because a half truth is a lie.
Right, absolutely. It's the middle of the road fallacy.
So that's where we are. We need to know more, and instead,
you cut out for a second. Say that last sentence.
We need to know more, because knowing only that we need to be sweet and nice is not doing our job.
Right, and again, the definition of nice means foolish and stupid. So if you're worried about being nice out there to everyone, you're worried about being foolish or not foolish and stupid enough. So take that into account.
I love to say this. Jesus was not a nice man. He was a kind man, but he was not a nice man.
That's very true.
He stirred up trouble. As a matter of fact, I sometimes wonder what are being taught in the pulpits at all anymore. Because Jesus was a difficult man. He offended those who were powerful. And the Christians that are here in Nashville, Tennessee are not going to offend anybody. They don't want to offend anybody. They don't want to debate on issues. And yet Jesus was debating even as a child or young and teenager. So you just kind of wonder, what are people reading anymore these days who go to church? I mean, it's just a question.
Right. Yeah. Well, and they need to.
And why wouldn't they take with relish? The Great Commission is the ultimate weapon against Islam.
Well, so much of Christianity has been watered down in the last 40 or 50 years, too, to make it not about this political Jesus that was all about truth and logos, but to make it about, peace and love and can't we all just get along type of stuff. And then meanwhile, Christians are being massacred and they're letting it happen.
And you've used the right term. We are letting it happen. It's not that it happens. And I think this is wrong. You don't have to be a Christian to look and say, look, if this is the most persecuted group of people in the world, not tending to their needs is wrong. You can be an atheist and reach that moral following. Am I crazy here?
Right. Well, and then the atheists will most likely support the Islamists and say, well, they're the ones that are the victims. And, people have a hard time grasping why we've been at war with Islam so long. And once you actually get in, if you use this thing called your brain or gray matter, and you get in there and you start reading these texts and you realize how much these books are about killing non-believers, then you begin to realize why we've been at war with them. They're not just happenstance wars for profit and this and that and, Christianity and Islam are two sides of the same coin type of stuff. Once you get that one is about truth or logos and the other one is about will and do whatever you want to and that they want to kill us, then you can begin to have a deeper understanding of the issue and not think in such shallow-minded cliche terms.
Well, we need to do some serious thinking because we're not doing it now. As a matter of fact, I've said these things so many times as I get weary of saying them in one more time. But we have to take the responsibility of reading the actual Islam. Islam is very simple. It is the doctrine contained in the Quran, the Surah, and the Hadith. That's it. So if that's where it is, then why not read it? Now, by the way, there was an excuse that could be made. Let me talk about this. We're at a unique point in history. For the first time in human history, it is possible for anybody to understand the doctrine of Islam. Anybody. Because all you have to do is read the biography of Muhammad, which has now been made simple. You read his traditions, which have now been made simple. And the Quran has now been made understandable as well. So for the first time in human history, the guy who comes to fix your commode can now understand Islam. Okay? It used to be you had to be really smart. You had to be a historian, you had to be an Arab scholar or whatever, but you don't have to anymore. Not only myself, but others such as Robert Spencer have written books so that anyone who can read a magazine can understand Islam. So therefore, why do we not shoulder the burden of understanding it? And by the way, let me say this to those who've never read it and studied it. It is fascinating. It's like a science fiction novel. It's like an upside down world. Everything that you thought you know is like denied. Let's talk about women. I have two daughters. I've been married to the same woman since 1963, okay, 57 years. I love women in every way. My grandchildren were here. I love them old and young, but we need to know that we need to take care of women. And instead, what is happening is we're letting people live amongst us who advocate wife beating. That's what the Quran does. That's what Muhammad did. And we're not objecting to this. How can you possibly maintain that you're any sort of feminist? And I don't mean a card-carrying feminist. I mean, even that you think that women should be treated well. How can you not speak out against Islam? I mean,
right. And whereas in stark contrast, the Bible very clearly states that men are to treat women as themselves, and you wouldn't hurt your own body, so why would you harm your wife?
well, I agree with you. But why is it that we have all of these nice people who are saying that we don't want to know anything about Islam because we might have to deal with it?
Right.
One time a man told me, he says, Bill, here's your problem. You know, all these facts that are painful. He says, you're like a man who's married to a woman who's the most beautiful woman in the world. She's worth millions of dollars. She's charming. She's got a great personality, and she's cheating on her husband. The husband doesn't want to know about this because then he will have to deal with the issue.
Right.
And he says, that's the problem with you. He says, you bring up issues that no one wants to deal with. Granted that we should deal with them, but we don't want to do it. And yet the painful part to me is that once you learn this material, you become highly skilled and you can become useful to your own children, to your own neighbors, to everyone else. You can become useful to your congregation. So this is what needs to be done. Look, I'm a former college professor. I'm an advocate of knowledge and teaching and learning. That's what I'm about. I'm also about the fact that learning is fun. Call me weird.
Right. Well, and it's always okay to admit when you're wrong about something when you discover a new truth. Most people don't have the intellectual honesty when they discover that they're wrong about something to go out and admit it. And then if you do go out and admit it, people like you and I are attacked. Oh, well, we must be Mossad agents or who knows, whatever type of, ad hominem that they want to create to marginalize the facts that we are bringing forth for people to understand. So, it's easier for people to name call it, you and I and Lloyd, et cetera, for exposing this stuff than it is for them to get a copy of the Quran and sit down and read it and go, oh my goodness, this stuff is correct. It's easier for people to say, it's all this evil book, the Talmud, which I was telling you, before the show, that I went through and I started checking all of these so-called quotes from the Talmud. Only 1 out of 70 that I checked was correct. That's 1.6% accuracy. That's 98.4% BS. And these quotes are touted around to, to justify these synagogue attacks and shootings and stuff going on.
Aye.
And meanwhile, it took me 2 days to find 75% of the same claims made against the Jews. 75% of them were found within 2 days in the Islamic texts without much effort. It took me 2.5 months to go through the Talmud and prove that all of these were false. 2 days to find the same stuff in the Islamic texts.
Oh, they don't hide it. I mean,
Right.
this is an open secret. This is an open secret. So anyway, by the way, if you want to learn about Islam, do not pick up the Quran first. Pick up the life of Muhammad first. Because once you understand Muhammad, then the Quran is like, oh, this is the way it makes sense. I published a Quran which I did something sort of interesting. I took all the verses in the Quran and put them in the right time order, so that the early stuff is early and the latter verses are later, which is different than the way the Quran is written. I then collected all the same topics together, and then I did the miracle thing of taking Muhammad's life and the Quran and putting them together, so that now then you can understand. Here's an example. When you read the Quran, all of a sudden this verse leaps off the page at you. Allah says to Muhammad, it was okay to burn the palm trees. And if you're reading the Quran, if you're reading it, you go, wait a minute, why on earth are we burning palm trees? Whose palm trees are these? And why was it okay to burn them? Well, it turns out if you were alongside Muhammad, you would know that 10 days before, he had attacked some Jews and was not able to defeat them. So he then took and burned down their date palms because they were date palm farmers. The Arabs of his own day said, Muhammad, that is a war crime because by Arab custom, you didn't burn crops. And he says, aha. And then Allah gives him this verse which said it was okay to burn the palm trees. Anyway, in my Quran, you have the story of Muhammad with the Jews before you get the verse the tree burning verse. So therefore, it's easy to understand. So I come back to this again. For the first time in human history, the Quran has been made easy for anyone to understand who just has even idle curiosity. This is the painfulness of my life. I thought when I presented this answer in a simple form that people would go, oh, Bill, thank you so much. And they would run to get it. Oh, they ran okay, but do you know which direction they ran? Out the door.
Right. Well, you and I have both experienced the same type of attacks and things for exposing this stuff, and it's quite interesting when like you said earlier, you get the most flack when you're over the target,
Yep.
and people don't want the public to know that Islam is the real issue,
Yes.
and you're supposed to be focused on evil Judaism and evil Christianity. And when you realize that the whole foundation of Western civilization and everything that we enjoy and freedom and everything there is based upon the Bible, the Old and New Testaments, and that, they basically want to create Chrislam by getting rid of the Old
Oh,
Testament, killing off the Jews and bringing in Sharia law, and then this is the new world peace that they want to bring in. Sonia Zam asks, Bill, do you perceive a real threat of Islamic dominance in Western governments eventually?
Yes. Here's why. They want it. They want the power, and we want to share the power. That's the reason they'll
Right.
win. We're willing to share it.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many people that I've had who defend Islam, who know nothing about it, and they're good, what they would call good Christians.
Right. Well, and Christians are supposed to follow logos, truth, reason, the word, and they're not using truth, reason, the word when they spew this stuff, and they get caught up in spewing lies and defending Islam. And, you go back to, Ishmael, and he's going to be the antagonist to the rest of humankind forever, and it's like, wait a second, this is not the religion of peace.
But let's take a look at a local university here, a Christian university. If you take what's in their catalog, you will come out thinking that Islam.
You cut out again for a second. Go ahead, repeat that last sentence.
At Lipscomb University, if you take the courses in their catalog, you'll come away thinking that Islam is the religion of peace, because the persecution of Christians over 1,400 years, 60 million Christians, they teach nothing of this history. That's wrong. You can be a secular university and you should know this history, because not only were Christians killed, Buddhists were killed, 10 million, 80 million Hindus, and 120 million Africans. You would think that these numbers would cause universities to want to teach about this information. Nope, they don't want to teach about it. They don't want their students to know about it. There are professors at Lipscomb University, which is, let me remind you again, a Christian school, who say that Christians and Muslims all worship the same God.
And when you grasp what's really going on, Christians worship logos, the word. Muslims worship will. Do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. That is not the same God by any stretch of anyone's imagination.
Oh, it drives me nuts to even, for some people to even, and these are what are called good people. And yet they advocate lies. Now,
Right.
I'm not sure how much they understand they're lying. And if they do think they're bending the truth a little, it's for a good reason. There's no good reason to lie, unless you are saving lives. If there's some bizarre, brutal circumstances, you and I are caught in a room with a masked gunman or something, I'm just making this up as I go. There may be some times in which lies can be said to save innocent souls. But in general, why not just deal with the truth of the matter? And again, I come back to the fact it's easy to know now. And I'll tell those who are listeners, it's not only easy to know, I advocate it is fun to know, because it gives you a certain feeling of power. Knowledge is power. And so we need to embrace knowledge so that we'll become powerful. But yes, I think we're losing this year something happened in Nashville, Tennessee. On the city council, we now have a member of the Muslim Brotherhood who now sits on the city council. And you know who was delighted with this election? The Christians were delighted. The Jews were delighted. The leftists were delighted. Everyone was so delighted that now then we have a Muslim sitting on our city council, and we are so, you ready for the T word? Tolerant.
Right. Well, and, everybody's always promoting this word diversity. We have to have diversity. Well, what's the root of diversity other than divide?
As a scientist, I've dealt with manufacturing process, and what you want is as little diversity as you can get on a production line. Diversity are called failed parts.
Right. Well, let me see here. At one point, I had looked this up, and let's see if. Okay, so I'm just looking in the Oxford English Dictionary here. Diversity, contrary to what is agreeable, good, or right. Perversity, evil, mischief. So here's diversity, folks, up on screen here. And perversity, evil, mischief. That's diversity. That's what you numbskulls who go around and say, we got to have diversity. That's what you're promoting. Perversity, evil, mischief. Right there. Right in the dictionary. So, it's like when people use this word nice, and nice actually means stupid or foolish. You got to start looking up what the words mean that you use. And when people realize that, diversity is a bad thing, that, it means to divide, division, let's look at the root word of things. And nice, well, we have to be nice, well, you don't have to be stupid or foolish. Nobody accuses me of being nice, I bet they don't accuse you of being nice either.
Actually, I don't think they do. My grandchildren think I'm nice.
Well, you should correct them next time. I'm kind, I'm friendly, I'm not nice, right? So let's see here. Talk about David Wood for a minute.
He's a great man. Well, that's the shortest summary we can give him, but it's true. Why do I call him a great man? Because he's courageous. He speaks in public the truth. He's a highly intelligent man. He's got brains to spare. I'm a big fan of his because of his courage, his willingness to present himself. We need 1,000 more just like him. The only problem with David Wood is he's only one.
Right? Yeah. Somebody's teasing me in the audience that I'm nice. So, yeah, and I forgot his channel, and I'd love to get him on the show. I've tried to reach out to him several times, but David, if you do end up seeing this episode, I'd love to get you on and help you promote your work. So reach out. I've sent you a few messages in the past. Would love to have you on. Talk about the government intervention into religion, such as the Bible versus the Quran, and places like the state of Washington. Oh boy, that's a big gas.
Well, you mentioned the state of Washington. There's a prison in Washington, D.C. I'm sorry, the state of Washington, a prison in the state of Washington, was now on their own webpage basically tell us that Islam is the religion of truth and peace. What does the penal system have to do with theology anyway? I mean, but here they come proclaiming all the things that Islam would like said about itself. The state of Washington, through one of its penitentiaries, is saying, no, this is all true. The thing that Christians and Muslims all worship the same God. All of these things are now because everyone, let me tell you something. Inside of the prison system, there's a great fear of Islam. Let me give you an example. I'm changing topics here, but I'm talking about the same thing. Had a man get in touch with me who was the head of the chaplains unit for the prison systems in Tennessee. And he said to me, he says, we're losing people all the time to Islam inside the prisons. What can I do? I says, I can tell you exactly how to stop it. He says, really? I says, yes. I says, you need to study Islam through the eyes of Muhammad and slavery. You need to learn about how Muhammad was a slaver. I had sex slaves. He had white slaves. He had Arab slaves. He had black slaves. I said, you need to teach the history of Islam and slavery. He was like, oh, I can't do that. I said, well, you asked me what to do. I told you what to do, because I said, many of the people being converted in prisons are black. The subject of slavery is very sensitive to them. So they need to understand that the world's biggest slave owner is Muhammad. I said, that'll cut. But what do we have here? We have here a Christian chaplain who is afraid to discuss the truth of Islam. So therefore, more men are being converted. How many more men do you think are converted in the state of Washington with the penal system saying, oh no, Islam is a great thing?
Of
course, there are more. So therefore, we get into this business, we're losing.
Last, spring or so, we did a show discussing Islam and slavery and how it's at the core of slavery. And of course, the Christians get blamed for it. It's always spun against Christianity.
I'll agree, but Christians themselves, I've seen Christians who are more than willing to be abused. I give you the Archbishop of Canterbury. He's willing to be abused at the role the white people had in slavery. Hello, Archbishop of Canterbury. How about waking up and learning the whole truth? Because it was British who stopped the slave trade in Africa. And yet, what the Christians do, they want to wallow around in the mud of their sins and wrongs instead of realizing, look, we stopped it.
Yeah, exactly. And, you have these liberals who are, self-hating, whatever, because their great grandfather may or may not have been involved in something that they know nothing about, and it's just...
Right.
It's just stupid stacked high. It gets really ridiculous. So let's see here. We already talked about your shadow banning. But, while we're on this topic, talk about leftists and progressives.
Well, we have two enemies in dealing with Islam. There's the far enemy, who is Islam. Then there's the near enemy, which are the apologists for Islam. Now then, you don't have to be a leftist to be an apologist for Islam, but they are the biggest and most powerful. And the reason is that the leftist and the Muslims look at each other and see something very similar in each other. They're both totalitarians, all right? And so they're totalitarians. They also want to create a utopian society by first destroying our society. So the left sees themselves as the hammer and the Muslims see themselves as the anvil. Now, the left thinks that after we destroy these bad people in America and in Europe, we'll then have a peaceful world with us living with a peaceful world with Islam. Don't know anything about history at all.
Well, and the leftists, the liberals, don't get that once the Christians are out of the way, the first people the Islamists will murder are the leftists.
Exactly. Let me give you a historic example of this. I ain't making this up. You heard of the country of Iran, which is now the Islamic Republic, so-called. Do you know who brought the Muslims to power? It was the Tudor Party, a leftist communist party in Iran. 5 days after Khomeini came to power, you know what he did? He issued death warrants for all the Tudor Party leaders. They were like a Kleenex. He'd used them. Now it's time to throw them away. So the left is not going to come out well in this.
Right.
But then again, the left are utopians, and so they don't believe history anyway.
Well, that's what Marxism is all about. You subjugate all of the morals of the culture, and you promote let's call it what it is, the fall. And then they believe that out of this destruction of morality and the promotion of pedophilia and transgender and murder and all of this stuff, this utopian world will rise out of this. When everybody lived under Logos, it already was a utopia, right? But they want to kill the utopia for this delusional Marxist Islamic, air quotes, utopian system where anything goes, including molesting children. Muhammad was, let's talk about his 6-year-old wife Aisha. And these imams and whatnot who talk about how it's okay to, you can't have sexual intercourse with a girl until she's 9 years and a day, but you can rub your phallus between her thighs up until that point, even if she's a suckling infant.
You can't make this stuff up, can you?
No, and of course, therefore all for that, because to the left, it's all freedom is about gay sex and doing drugs and NAMBLA and promoting pedophilia and this sort of thing. That's what they think freedom is. They don't even understand that their right, their freedom to whine, bitch, and complain about Christianity and the right comes from Christianity and the right,
Have them move to an Islamic nation and criticize Islam, see how well they like that.
Right, and see how long they live, being transgender and gay, and it won't be very long, and then
it'll be a painful death.
And it'll be a painful death, and then they'll be sitting there longing for the Christian culture they so despised and helped subjugate.
But we have to blame the Christians in this as well, because they're willing to do anything to just get along.
Well, and, if Christians would stick to what is logos, what is truth and reason, and not subjugate themselves to all of these lies, we could fix this thing. But, for the last 50 years, Christianity has been so heavily, reinterpreted for this soft Christianity, that, people don't understand what it's about at its core, and how all of the high cultures throughout the world were Christian. What high arts, etc., have Islamist countries brought us?
Well, let's take the modern times. There's never been a Nobel Prize won by a Muslim working on his own in a Muslim nation. Never has happened even once. There have been a handful of Muslims who've received Nobel Prizes who are working with Kafirs, non-Muslims, and in Kafir countries, non-Muslim countries. So I give you this just little example. Scotland, little Scotland has won more Nobel Prizes in science than all of Islam. But then again, here's Islam as well. There's never been a best-selling novel translated into Arabic. Did you know that?
Wow.
As a matter of fact, fewer than 200 books a year. I'm excluding manuals. I'm talking about literature. I'm not
So
talking about the manual you get.
your Chilton's manual, right?
Right, your Chilton's manual. So, but otherwise, I mean, we have the information in front of us. We have to start using it. We have to, instead of blaming others for our faults, because what have Christians done? They've brought Marxism within the theology schools. Let me give you an example of a seminary out of Kentucky. These are little stories that I've accumulated. This woman was in a seminary school, a Methodist school, and another woman said to her that she used to be a Muslim and she'd converted to Christianity. What did the Christian say? Well, why would you do that? Islam is a wonderful religion. This is inside a seminary. So therefore, this woman doesn't have to be pushed very far until she's just pious and useless.
Well, she should go talk to Sonia Azam.
I advocate that every church needs to bring apostates into their church. I tell you this, Christians in that church would learn what real Christianity is.
And they would learn what real Islam is as well,
That as well.
Right? So Sonia, try to drag him kicking and screaming into churches on the weekends, Go down to Cajon Street on that corner where the four churches are and drag him in there. But, let's see. So how has Islam subjugated other cultures for 1,400 years?
Well, because they have a winning plan and they continue to use the same plan over and over again. That's a short answer. But the reason is that when Christianity and the Persians had fought against each other, they were weakened militarily. And this was the world that Islam exploded out of the Arabian Peninsula into this new, and they were able to take advantage of the weakened Persians and the weakened Christians. This process has gone on for 1,400 years since then. And what has happened is that Christians have been unwilling to engage Islam on ideological war. And this is what needs to be done. And I think it should be done in a somewhat joyous fashion. And when I talk about ideological war, people may get sort of a little frightened here, but I'm talking about something which is the telling of truth and the argument about truth.
And thank you, everybody in the chat who's been donating and supporting the show tonight. Thanks, Dashing Rogue. He says, Happy New Year and welcome to the Roaring 20s. That is right. We are entering the Roaring 20s. Here we go. And thanks to everyone else who supported the show tonight. I greatly appreciate it. Bill, I'd love to have you back. You're a great guest.
That's just because I talk a lot.
Right? Well, that helps other than dead air, if, what we could do is just sit here and stare at, the camera for an hour and not say anything,
Right.
and babble senseless nonsense, but, the thing is facts and primary research in the last 5, 6, 7 years have become hate speech, and people can't use, they don't use the trivium. They don't use grammar, logic, and rhetoric, who, what, where, when, why, and how before they come to any conclusion. They think that whatever they believe through emotion, or even worse, primacy of consciousness, whatever they push out onto the world, that's reality. This is the thinking of today. Whatever feels good, whatever I like, facts don't matter because, you're just a reflection of me, Bill. You don't have your own free agency to do what you want. You're just 100% of a reflection of me. And in the liberal mind, the most egoic thing ever, they are God because everything is just a reflection of them,
Well, it's a sad world. I'm an intellectual. I love thought. I love reasoning. And I want to use it to help save the civilization I'm in. That's basically my life goal.
Well said. So let's get you back on sometime soon.
All right. Let's do it.
All right. And next week, let's see. I think, next week, Steve Jones is going to be on. That should be a good show. We'll be doing part 3 with him, and he wants to get into the real history of Bethlehem, etc. And so that'll be good. And then I'm not sure who will be on the 14th. It'll probably be John Kleisik again to talk about the school world order and the trivium again. And so we have lots of good stuff lined up. Thank you so much, Bill, for your participation tonight. I really appreciate you coming on in such short notice.
Glad to help. Look, I've enjoyed myself. Have you enjoyed yourself?
Absolutely. I like talking to you because, you're actually, it's rare that that you come across people who are intelligent enough to get this stuff, right?
Yep. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks
for what you do and who you are.
Likewise. And good night. Thanks, everybody, for your support. Happy New Year. You got about 6 hours left from now to get to your New Year's party or whatever you're planning to do tonight. And so we'll wrap it up here and see you next year. Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.